Welcome back to our disaster management course. I am Dr. Nagalapur Muni Pradeep, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, SR University. And we are in Unit 1, that is Introduction to Disaster Management. And today we are on Lecture 5. Our topic for this session is a Disaster Management Act, which is established in 2005. In Disaster Management Act, its overview and its importance. So in our previous lectures, we have built a strong conceptual foundation. We understand what disasters are, how hazards, the vulnerabilities, risk, and the capacity interact, what the devastating social, economic, environmental impacts of disasters look like, and how the prevention, mitigation, and preparedness strategies can reduce those impacts. But understanding these concepts is not enough on its own. Yes, for this concept to translate into real world action, there must be a legal and institutional framework that assigns responsibility, and they provide the authority and allocate resources. So without any laws, disaster management remains an aspiration, and with the provision of law, it becomes an obligation. So this is exactly what the Disaster Management Act 2005 provides. It is the legal backbone of India's entire disaster management system. It establishes who is responsible for what and at which level of government, with what kind of powers and resources every government department have. Every institution, every plan, every response operations in India's disaster management system derives its authority from the Disaster Management Act. So by the end of the lecture 5, you will understand the origins and the significance of the Disaster Management Act 2005, its structure across 11 chapters, the 4 levels of the institutional framework it creates, the roles and the functions of each institution from the National Disaster Management Authority down to the local authority, the National Institute of Disaster Management, the National Disaster Response Force, that is NDRF, and the National Disaster Response Fund. And this lecture is highly relevant not just for your examination point of view, but for your future professional interaction with the government bodies, the disaster management authorities, and the public infrastructure projects. So all of which operate within the framework established by the Disaster Management Act. So with this introduction, we'll proceed with the next slide. I'm giving 30 seconds of the time. You please go through the recap. So before we begin today's content, let us take a few minutes to recap our lecture 5. I have completed in 3 sessions with part A, part B and part C. So all these lectures covered the prevention and mitigation strategies. So this recap is very important because whatever the strategies we are discussing today, whatever the strategies we are discussed in the lecture 4 are precisely what the Disaster Management Act 2005 seeks to institutionalize and mandate through the law. So everything we studied in the lecture 4, that is every strategy, every measure, every institutional arrangement has a counterpart in the Disaster Management Act 2005 that makes it is a legal requirement rather than just a recommendation from the government. So now let us see how that law is structured. So now let us begin the introduction to the Disaster Management Act 2005. So the first point is when and how the act was enacted. So the Disaster Management Act was enacted by the Parliament of India on 23rd December 2005. Again, I am highlighting the Disaster Management Act was enacted by the Parliament of India on 23rd December 2005. This date is very significant because it came less than a year after the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami of 26th December 2004, which killed nearly 16,000 people in Tamil Nadu and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands alone, and exposed the complete absence of a comprehensive legal and institutional framework for disaster management in India. So, so my question is, before the Disaster Management Act 2005, see, some textbooks they quoted DM Act 2005, which means the Disaster Management Act 2005. So before the DM Act 2005, India had no unified national legislation for disaster management. There is no legislation. So the 2001 Bhuj earthquake and the 2004 tsunami together created the political will and the public pressure to enact comprehensive disaster management legislation. And the end product is the DM Act 2005, which was the direct legislative response to the 2001 and 2005 disasters, the India's commitment to never again being caught to unprepared. So what the act provides. So why? What are the things provided in this act? This act provides a comprehensive legal framework for disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. So whatever we discussed on the last 4 lectures. So this is a comprehensive legal framework. There is a guide. Notice that this act covers all phases of the disaster management cycle. It is not only limited to emergency responses alone. So this is a crucial feature that distinguishes it from earlier more limited legislation that focused primarily on relief. So before 2005 also we have many disaster management acts. Those are mainly concentrated on relief measures rather than the preparedness. So this act defines what is disaster, what is the hazard, and what is the disaster management. Now, many times we discuss these terms. So it creates an institutional bodies at national level, the state level, and district level with specific mandates and specific powers. So it requires the preparation of disaster management plans at every level, and it established a dedicated disaster response force and financial mechanisms to aid the disaster response forces. And also it creates offenses and penalties for non-compliance, giving the act a real legal teeth. So through this act you can give the you can create the offenses as well as penalties for non-compliance. So, and the third point, it is mainly emphasis on shifting from reactive emergency responses to proactive risk reduction. So this is one of the most important features of the DM Act 2005, which is a shift from a reactive emergency responses to proactive risk reduction. So before this act, the government's primary concern in disaster management was how do we respond after a disaster strikes? See here, what was the thinking level? How do we respond after a disaster strikes? So the act reframes the question as this act, whatever the disaster management act, which reframes the question as how do we prevent disasters from occurring and how do we reduce their impact when they occur to us? They after happen, how do we reduce their impact? This shift is embedded in the very structure of the act. That is, the first activities it mandates are prevention and mitigation, and it is not talking about the relief. The first activities were prevention as well as mitigation. So it requires the creation of disaster management plans at every level that must be addressed the risk reduction and not the just emergency responses. This proactive orientation represents a fundamental advance in India's approach to disaster governance. And the final one, the scope, mainly the scope of the disaster management. This act is applicable to both natural as well as man-made disasters. This is very important because it means that uh, the industrial accidents, the chemical accidents, the biological emergencies, the spillways, and other technological disasters are all within the scope of Act's institutional framework. So the NDMA is responsible for guiding disaster management policy for all kind of categories, not just the natural ones that tend to receive the most attention. See, before 2005, whatever be the natural disasters, people are mainly focusing on those natural disasters. But after this institutional body, the NDMA is considering both natural as well as man-made disasters. And this is very important in this slide, in this lecture. That is, now we are looking at the overall structure of the Disaster Management Act 2005. This act is organized into totally 11 chapters, each chapter addressing a specific aspects of disaster management governance. You can see here the DM Act 2005 is a disaster management governing body, legislative body, and in that body it is talking about the 11 chapters. So let me walk through all these 11 chapters. This structural overview will help you understand how the different parts of Act related to each other, right? I'll give you the 30 seconds time. You please go through all the 11 chapters. I'll explain each chapter in detail. Okay. So first we'll talk about the chapter 1. The preliminary chapter provides the foundational legal definitions and the short title of the Act. I'm repeating, the preliminary chapter which provides the foundational legal definitions and the short title of the Act. What are those legal definitions? So it defines the key terms, whatever we discussed in the lecture 1. So it defines the key terms such as what is disaster, what is the disaster management, the hazard, mitigation, the capacity buildings, the word preparedness, response, and all many other definitions. So the first chapter is only defining the definitions. These definitions are legally binding. That means they determine the scope of the act and how its provisions are interested and applied. Right. So this is what the chapter 1. Now coming to the chapter 2, that is National Disaster Management Authority. So this chapter establishes the National Disaster Management Authority, we usually call NDMA. So in before first 4 lectures, I used the term NDMA many times, and there I told you that I'll explain in detail in the coming lectures. So that is today lecture. So this second chapter, they established the National Disaster Management Authority, we usually call as NDMA. Now from now onwards, I'll usually call NDMA. So this NDMA is the apex body for disaster management in India. See, this NDMA is the apex body for disaster management in the India. It defines the compositions of the NDMA. So with the Prime Minister as the chairperson and up to 9 nominal members. Total 10 members. The chairperson is the Prime Minister of India and 9 nominal members. This NDMA prescribes the functions and the powers of NDMA very in detail. So we'll study this chapter extensively in subsequent slides. Right. Now 3 chapters were completed. Sorry, 2 chapters were completed. Uh, Coming to the third chapter, that is State Disaster Management Authority. So the NDMA is national-wide, SDMA is state-wide. So in every state and union territories, SDMAs are they established an SDMAs. So it mirrors the exact structure of chapter 2 in the state level, with the chief minister as chairperson of SDMA, and also it prescribes the powers and functions of SDMAs in relation to their state's disaster management planning and response. Now national level is completed, state level is completed. Now coming to the chapter 4, that is District Disaster Management Authority. So this we usually call DDMAs, which is established in every districts of the every state. So the district collector or the district magistrate is the chairperson of the DDMA. So the DDMA is the frontline implementing body of the entire disaster management system, and it is very closest to the communities at risk and is responsible for day-to-day disaster preparedness, prevention and response coordination at the district level. See, the DDMA is the first person because all the local people, they have the local dialect, they have connections with the local people, and these are the first persons who entered in the field. Depending upon the feedback taken from the DDMA, that put after that SDMA and NDMA also responds. Now coming to the chapter 5, that is measures by the government for disaster management. So this chapter 5 prescribes the specific measures that the central governments, the state governments and the departments must take for disaster management. It requires the preparation of national, state and district disaster management plans, and it also mandates the integration of disaster management considerations into development planning. It also assigns specific responsibilities to different ministries and different departments in the government. And next one is talking about the local authorities. So this chapter addresses the role of local bodies, that is called Panchayati Raj institutions at the village and block levels, and then urban local bodies such as municipal corporations and town panchayatis in disaster management. These local authorities are required to ensure that their plans and activities contribute to disaster prevention, mitigation and preparedness. This chapter also recognizes the critical importance of grassroots level engagement in disaster management. These local authorities only gave the exact field condition to DDMA, right? So next, coming to the chapter 7. Till chapter 6 we are talking about the authorities. Now the chapter 7 is very important. It is talking about the National Institute of Disaster Management, that is called NIDM, National Institute of Disaster Management. This established NIDM as the premier institution for capacity development, the training and the research work on all the knowledge management in disaster management in India. All the research, everything was done in NIDM. So we'll study the NIDM in detail in later slides. And the chapter 8 is talking about National Disaster Response Force. You people may heard NDRF team, NDRF team, NDRF team. So the full name is National Disaster Response Force, as the specialized federal force for disaster responses. This is the only specialized federal force for disaster responses. So the NDRF is India's frontline professional disaster response capability. That means the force that is most visibly deployed during all kind of major disasters. So now we are talking about the authorities and the institutions and the force. Now chapter 9 is talking about the financial architecture of disaster management in India. That is the National Disaster Response Fund, also the State Disaster Response Fund, and the provisions for their financing, accounting and auditing. Also, it sets the legal basis for the allocation and use of disaster funds by government authorities. So now the chapter 10 will talk about the offences and penalties. So this chapter gives the act of its legal force. For suppose it prescribes the penalties for officials who obstruct disaster management work, for persons and also who are spreading the fake information, false early warning systems, and for those people who are appropriate the disaster relief funds, we are wasting the funds. So without this chapter, the act's requirements would be mere recommendations with no consequences for non-compliances. And the chapter 11, the final chapter, contains in general provisions including the power to make rules, the protection of actions taken in a good faith under the act, and also the power of central government to issue directions to the state governments on disaster management matters. So, taken together all these 11 chapters, which creates a comprehensive, multi-tiered, legally enforceable framework for disaster management in India, from the highest policy level at the Prime Minister's office down to the village panchayat level. I hope you understand. For this, I am waiting for this slide only from last 4 lectures, because all people are talking about the um, prevention techniques, mitigation techniques, all these things. But I want to emphasize what is the DMA Act and what are the 11 chapters. With this, I'll go through the next one. So, the main object, the DM, till now we are talking about the chapters. Now we are talking about the main objectives of Disaster Management Act, which includes to create a legal framework for disaster planning at national level, state level, and district levels. So, whatever we discussed in chapters, and also to ensure a prompt and coordinated response during disasters. So, when disaster happen, there is a prompt connection between the state level, national level, district level, local level. Also, to promote the disaster awareness and capacity buildings, to create awareness, to strengthen the social cohesion between the communities, and the most importantly, to reduce the risk of future disasters through mitigation and preparedness. So this objective we discussed in the last class. With this, you can see the images. So we discussed already this one. Yeah. Now coming to the major portion of this Disaster Management Act. So this DM Act 2005, which creates a 4-level institutional framework for disaster management in India. So this framework is not eligible for other countries. This is only eligible for Indian. So this tiered structure ensures that the disaster management responsibilities are carried out at every level of governance, from the national level all the way down to the local village and urban neighborhood level. So those 4 levels are: the first one national level, the second one state level, third one district level, and fourth one is local level. So now let us briefly overview each level before we examine each one in detail in the following slides. The first one, so here only I'm explaining. So in the next slides, I'll quickly um, turn the slides. Okay. See the first one, at the national level, the key institutions are the what we discussed already, NDMA, that is National Disaster Management Authority. You can see the image. The first one is NDMA, which is chaired by the Prime Minister and provides the highest level policy direction. Okay, so that is NDMA, and the second body under national level, that is National Executive Committee, the NEC, which is chaired by the Home Secretary and provides operational coordination at the national level. And the third one, the National Advisory Committee, we usually call the NAC, which provides expert technical and scientific advice to the NDMA. So now quickly, briefly explain. NDMA was the authority, NEC will give you the operational coordination, and the third one, NAC, which provides the technical and scientific knowledge. So this is the national level. Exactly at the state level, the mirror institutions are the SDMA, that is called State Disaster Management Authority, which is chaired by the Chief Minister, and State Executive Committee SCC, the chaired by the Chief Secretary, and the State Advisory Committee SAC, which providing expert technical advice at the state level. So at the district level also, DDMA, that is a District Disaster Management Authority, which is chaired by the District Collector or District Magistrate, with the elected head of the Jilla Parishad as co-chairperson. Also, the DDMA is the most important operational unit in the entire system, because it is the institution that coordinates actual disaster preparedness and response on the ground level. All above the state and national, they are simply giving the directions. And next one, at the local level, Panchayati Raj institutions such as Gram Panchayats, Panchayat Samitis, and Jilla Parishads, also urban local bodies, municipal corporations, and town panchayats. These all are assigned responsibilities for community level disaster preparedness and awareness. So these are the four levels. These four level structures ensures that disaster management is not just a national government concern, but a responsibility that is owned and implemented at every level of Indian government system. The national level sets policies and coordinates, the state level plans and allocates resources, and the district level coordinates and implementation. Finally, the local level engages communities very directly. So I hope you understand all the four levels. With this, quickly we'll go to the next one. So we already explained NDMA, National District Management Authority, the NEC, NAC. So, so I'll quickly explain the point. So first one is NDMA. The NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, which is consists of chairperson and other members. So another member will be nominated as vice chairman apart from the prime minister. So what NDMA will do? They lay down the policies on disaster management, and also they approve the national plans. They approve the plans prepared by ministries or departments of the government of an India accordance with the national plans. So they'll submit the all departmental ministries, they submit plan to NDMA. And also NDMA lay down guidelines for state authorities in drawing up the state plan. Also, NDMA laid down guidelines to be followed by different ministries or departments of the departments of GOI, Government of India. And also, they coordinate the enforcement and implementation of the policy and plan for disaster management. And finally, this NDMA will recommend provision of funds for the purpose of mitigation. So I already explained, so that's why I'm quickly reading the points. Sometimes this NDMA only provide support to other countries affected by the major disasters as may be determined by the central government, because the Prime Minister is head for this NDMA. So other measures for the prevention of disasters or the mitigation or the preparedness and capacity buildings for dealing with the threatening disaster situation. So they lay down broad policies and guidelines for the functioning of National Institution of Disaster Management. Next one, the NEC. The Government of India will constitute the NEC to assist the NDMA. Here the chairperson is Secretary of Ministry of Home Affairs, that is MHA, and the members are secretaries of the following key ministries or departments. So here all the departmental ministries are head members of NEC. For suppose you can see the NEC committee, the functions, everything I have explained here. For suppose the what NEC will do, they coordinate and monitor implementation of NDMA policies and plans. Whatever the NDMA will give you the plans, this NEC committee they'll implement the policies, and also it prepares NEC committee prepares the national plan for disaster management, and they coordinate response to disasters at the national level. And they provide the technical assistance to state governments and state disaster management authorities SDMA, and they ensure integration of disaster mitigation into development plans, and also they monitor preparedness and response measures across all the ministries. And the next one is NAC. So NDMA is giving the preparing the policies, NEC is helping to take care of the policies, whether those policies are implemented or not. And the third one is the National Advisory Committee, that is NAC. National authority may constitute the advisory committee consisting of all the experts. Here the engineers, scientists, everything came under as a advisory committee members. The central government will fix the number of members in consultation with the national authorities. So the main functions of NAC, which advises the NDMA, and whatever be the plans, national plans, policies and guidelines from the NDMA and NAC, it will review and give the comments, and they recommend capacity building measures for disaster management. That means they provide the evacuation plans, all these things, early warning system, what kind of early warning systems are very effective. Everything research was done by NAC, and they suggest research priorities and innovation areas. This is what NAC. You can see the here NDMA through NDMA through NAC of NEC. In that NAC, you can see the scientists are there, doctors are there, environmentalists are there, meteorologists are there, NGOs are there. All these are expert committee members. So now similar mirror structure, that is state level, SDMA, SCC, and SAC. So I'm not explaining because pin to pin everything is same. NDMA is talking about the national, SDMA is talking about the state. Right. So I'll simply explain the powers of SDMA, the same as NDMA. So and then district also. This is very important. So the DDMA will prepare disaster management plans, which including disaster response plan for the district, and ensures that the areas in the districts vulnerable to disasters are identified and measured for the prevention of disasters and mitigation of its effects, because they know the ground reality. And also the DDMA monitor the implementation of disaster management plans prepared by the departments of the governments at the district levels. And also they set up, they maintain, review and upgrade the mechanisms for early warning systems, whether they are working fine in the real ground conditions. All the data will be reviewed by DDMA and submitted to SDMA, then they submitted to NDMA, right? So next there is two more bodies, that is National Institute of Disaster Management, and then next one is National Disaster Response Force, NDRF. So these two I'll explain in coming classes in next lecture, that is part B of lecture 5, and finally I'll explain in detail about the exact how these bodies NDMA, SDMA, NEC, NAC, DDMA, all these institutions work on one real issue. I'll take one case study and how all these institutional bodies are involved in that disaster. So that I'll explain in the part B of lecture 5. With that, I'll complete the total introduction of Disaster Management Act. With that, I thought I gave overall view of the Disaster Management Act, disaster management, and also Disaster Management Act in all possible ways, 360 degrees. So I hope you understand the importance of this subject. If it is benefited to you, I'll be very happy. So please review today's notes carefully before the next class, because this lecture contains a large number of institutional names, the compositions and the functions that are very very important for your examination and for thinking purpose. So if you have any questions, reach out to me at nmp560@gmail.com, or also you can comment your questions. So I'll go through and I'll be very happy to explain to you. So thank you all, and I will see you in the next class. Thank you very much.